Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm Colin Beavan. I'm the author of the book, How to Be Alive, A Guide to the Kind of Happiness That Helps the World. And weren't these guys great? I was just like, wait, you should choose her book. And I was like, no, you should choose her book. And then I'm like, wait, no, you should choose my book. But I feel honored to, I just remember when I looked at books when I was little, and I always wished I could be an author. And I just imagined being in the same room as authors, and I still get the same buzz when I'm at a table with other authors. I'm like, I'm sitting with authors. And it's an honor to share this stage with them today. You guys are, you know this, but you're all first-year experience people. And I have two things to thank you for. First of all, in my own career as a college student, I found that for many professors, I was kind of an inconvenience who was facilitating their paycheck but standing in the way of their research time. And with my last book, No Impact Man, I was on a lot of college campuses, and I met a lot of you guys or people like you. And what impressed me so much is that you actually care about the kids. And you didn't just care about whether they were academic, you didn't just care about their brains, but you cared about their hearts and their souls too. And it made me feel good to see it. It made me feel like that's what education is supposed to be about. So thank you for that. Other thing I wanted to thank you for was No Impact Man, my last book. I don't even know the number, but it was adopted on maybe 40, maybe 50, maybe 60 college campuses. And when you're a writer and you're writing a book, you kind of what keeps you going is you imagine, you're writing this book, but then you kind of imagine somebody going into a bookstore, right? And they go in and they look in at all the books and all the tables and they pick them up and they read the back and then they kind of come to yours and they look at it and they read it and they're like, this one. And then they walk to the cashier with your book and they buy it and they choose it. And that's kind of what you fantasize about when you're writing a book. But if 1,000 or 2,000 students are forced to read your book, that's a good second option. So thank you for that, too. The truth is about students having to read my books is that it's been an incredible experience. I get a lot of emails from students saying that my previous book, No Impact Man, changed their lives. Letters from students saying they changed their majors, they changed their careers, all sorts of things. But one student I was thinking of in particular was one student that I met who was on a pre-med track, and she was going to be a brain surgeon. But she kind of felt like that was what her parents wanted her to be, not what she wanted to be. And it always impresses me when the students write to me and then engage in an email correspondence. So we corresponded and I actually sent her a couple of exercises to help her figure out who she was and what she wanted to be. And she eventually wrote to me and she decided that she did want to be a doctor, but she wanted to work for Doctors Without Borders, and that she wanted to work in areas of conflict because her family came from Pakistan, and she did not want to be a brain surgeon. And having experiences like that with students because of you guys made my work feel meaningful and purposeful. So thank you for that. I want to start by saying this. We're in the midst of a time of amazing opportunities. And when I say opportunities, I don't mean opportunities to make money or to have great advancement or to have a great job. I mean we're in a time of opportunities to help, to feel purposeful and to feel meaningful. We have climate change, we have rampant race and social injustice, we have an economy that still seems to be teetering so that recent college graduates, 1 in 5, are either unemployed or underemployed. We have a crazy political system that's so full of special interest money that it's hard to believe that anybody gives a crap about the problems that are facing our world. But here's the thing. when there's so much suffering in the world, that means there's also so much room for all of us to make a difference in other people's lives. Again, I don't mean there's an opportunity for material advancement. I mean that there is not only the necessity, but room for all of us to work to heal this world that we live in. It's a time when we can really make something of ourselves. And I'd argue that when we say to make something of yourself, it doesn't mean to get a big home or to have a fancy job. Making something of yourself means helping other people. And other people need help in vast proportions right now. That's what I mean when I say it's a time of amazing opportunity. But how do you take advantage of this opportunity? I'm going to tell you a story, a little bit of a sad story of a college student that I met at a college in Indiana. I was there to talk, and the president of the college had a dinner and selected just a bunch of students to come to the dinner. And the college president said, can we go around the table and introduce ourselves to Colin? Let's say, tell him your name and your college major. Like, just say the most boring thing you could possibly say about yourself. So I interrupted and I said, actually, do you mind, could we go around the table and everybody talk about what most concerns them in the world? And by the way, you know, I don't know about you, but I've been in these things where they're like, say what kind of vegetable would you be if you were a vegetable? Or something like that. It's a terrible icebreaker. This is a good icebreaker because it's intensely personal. When most of us, when we have a concern in the world, it's connected to something that we've experienced ourselves. Anyway, so it went around the table, and it was a lovely conversation. It got to this one kid, and he said that that summer he'd had a job where he biked around the town delivering secondhand books to kids, and that he loved it. It was he was working for an educational organization, and he said, "I love biking. I really care about the environment, so I love that it's secondhand books. I really care about equal access to education." He said, "I just really loved it." And then we're all sitting there and kind of feeling excited by what he's saying. He gets this really sad look on his face. And then he says, "But I'm so sad I can't do that anymore." You know, I was like, why can't you do it? It's like this kid had found himself, you know? I was like, "Why can't you do it anymore?" He said, "Well, I want a family." I was like, "Well, what's that got to do with it?" And he said, "Well, if I'm going to have a family, I have to make money, and to make money, I'm going to have to go do an MBA. So maybe I could do something like that again when I'm 60, when I retire." And there was kind of total silence at the table when he said that, because it had such a tremendous weight to it, because this kid kind of knew who he was, and he was telling us he was going to turn his back on it. And it wasn't just sad for him. It was sad for everybody at the table, because what that story points out is what we're supposed to do with our lives. There's a set of instructions in our society that goes something like this. 1, we're supposed to ignore the needs of the world and assume somebody else will take care of them while we go about taking care of ourselves. 2, we're supposed to give up on our passions and fit into whatever job we can find. And 3, having a good life means fitting yourself into a mold where we leave what's important to other people. This, by the way, is, following these directions, by the way, some of you will know, is the reason why so many of us have midlife crises. Because we alienate ourselves from ourselves, and eventually, in midlife, it explodes out. But that same alienation that makes us depressed about our own lives is the same alienation that makes us unable to see and to do things about the world's suffering. So what do we do? I'll just take a step back to kind of the origin of this book, which is back in 2007, I lived a year as environmentally as possible in the middle of New York City. I did it partly to draw attention to climate change, and I did it partly to ask, how are we really supposed to live? What's a way to live that's both happy and good for the world? And I won't tell you much about that project, except that what I discovered in the course of the year is so much of what I had decided to do for the sake of the habitat was actually better for me too. That there is this kind of intersection between the big problems in the world and all of our personal lives. That the same things that make us unhappy as people, as individuals, are the same types of, like basically the consumer-based economy, are the same things that are screwing up the world. So as I said, that story got adopted at a lot of college campuses, and I think it's because, well, I was told it was because it connects problems in the world with our personal lives, and that's kind of my specialty, figuring out how to talk about big problems in the world in ways that connect to our personal lives. And that's what How to Be Alive does too. It's basically based on a philosophy. It's by the way, it sits in the self-help shelves, but I call it an each other help book, not a self-help book. It's because the self-help, I think self-help in these times is like fighting for the best deck chair on the Titanic. You guys know about the Titanic, right? It's sunk, right? What we should be doing is each other help, which is keeping the boat afloat together, right? So that's the central philosophy of How to Be Alive. When I go to college campuses, there are always two questions. One, what's it like to be on Colbert? Two, what do I do with my life? In that order. And so this book is kind of the answer to that. It's a book about what to do with your life. It's a book about how to live the line between being a martyr to the world and being a scoundrel who only does things for themselves and only lives for themselves. I'm going to tell you briefly about a young person who did the opposite of what my friend in Indiana did. She refused to alienate herself from herself. And she loved biochemistry, and when she graduated from college, she got a job in research at NYU at the hospital, and she was so excited. And then she went to the hospital, and it turned out, this is gross, but it's true, her job was to puree mouse brains and put them in slides and look at them. And she couldn't do it, and she quit, and she was unemployed for a while. And she started being involved. Because she was following her passions, she started being involved in a community garden in a city, in a garden where they were growing vegetables on an abandoned lot. And her interest automatically went towards the quality of the soil and what was happening in the soil, because that's where a lot of biochemical stuff is happening. And she realized that the soil had been degraded because it was city soil, and so they needed compost. And so they needed a community compost pile. And she went and she got a big plastic drum, and she put it in the middle of the neighborhood park, and she put 3 cinder blocks in the bottom of it so that the park workers could not remove it. And then she put up a sign, and it said, composting, Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And she started this composting system, and before long, there was 100 families involved in this composting project, and she had become a community activist. You could say, what difference does it make, one little compost pile? But the thing is that around the city, other people were doing the same thing in community gardens, and it built a critical mass, and now the city actually has developed curbside composting because of this. So I think you could argue that becoming yourself to help the world, which is what Kate did, is the highest form of human development. It's self-actualization. There's a Christian writer, Frederick Buechner, he says, God calls us to the place where our own greatest joy meets the world's greatest sorrow. Where what I love about myself and what I love doing, I do in service of the things that I care most about the world. And How to Be Alive, in contrast to the alienation that we talked about, in contrast to the 3 points that I talked about, the ways that we're supposed to live our lives, I talk about these 3 points. You are not, 1, you are not supposed to ignore your concerns in the world. You are supposed to embrace them. 2, you are not supposed to ignore your passions and what you love to do, but figure out how to do them in service of your concerns. 3, you are not supposed to fit yourself into a mold and leave what is important to other people. You are supposed to become yourself and take responsibility for what you believe is important. I'm going to read you a tiny bit out of the book, and then I'll be done. It's only a short section, but before I do that, I want to say this. As I mentioned, I have been on a lot of college campuses, and I've worked with a lot of students, and I love it, and it's my passion, and it feels like a privilege and an honor to me to work with young people. And I do visit the campuses, and I am willing to work with people to develop programs because this is my work, to help people find lives that are better for them and better for the world. I'm going to read you this little tiny bit. Also, you can follow me at all, at Colin Beavan on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and feel free to email me or whatever. You can do that on my webpage. This little passage comes from people asking, does it even matter if I do anything? Do we have hope as humanity? And this is actually the last passage in the book. The Buddha always refused to speak about unanswerable questions like whether there's life after death. He said trying to answer these questions is like a man who's been shot with a poison arrow, who instead of removing the arrow insists on finding out who shot the arrow, who made it, and how long it is. The most profound question in life, the Buddha believed, is not what happens when I die, but just in this moment, how shall I live? What is my function? Asking if there is hope for humanity is a little like asking one of Buddha's unanswerable questions. If you're walking down the sidewalk and a car runs over a child, what do you do? Do you stop and ask, is there hope for this child? The question itself distracts you from doing what's important. You must run and help the child. Now, at this moment in history, the world is like the child. You must help it. Me too. We all must. Don't get distracted. This sounds like a terrible responsibility, but it's actually a wonderful opportunity. The world has so many problems that it needs all our special skills and talents. It needs scientists and economists and singers and musicians and children and Christians and Hindus and people of every type. What makes this such a wonderful moment is that with so much trouble, each of us can make a difference. So don't waste time asking if there's hope for this world. Rather, what can you do right now as the amazingly special and uniquely talented person you are to pull out the poison arrow, to save the child on the sidewalk, to help this suffering world? The question is not whether the world has hope. The question is, how do I give the world hope? Or more simply, how can I help? Thank you.